This webinar is about the Meaningful Watershed Educational Experience, also known as the MWEE. My name is Elise Trelligan. I'm the Program Coordinator for NOAA's BWET program. BWET is the Bay Watershed Education and Training Program, which funds locally relevant, authentic experiential learning for K-12 audiences through MWEEs. You can learn more about the BWET program on our website, www.noaa.gov/office-education/BWET. Today I'm going to tell you about the MWEE. We'll be exploring the following topics: why MWEEs, what makes a MWEE, tools for supporting MWEEs, and some resources for continuing your MWEE education. Before we dive into this, you'll watch this video that gives some visual clues on what MWEEs are all about. As you watch, consider what resonates most with you. Have you facilitated some of these activities before? Are you familiar with any of the words rolling across the screen? And most importantly, what is your role in the MWEE?
Is it steep or flat? Very cloudy? Okay. 7 is heaven for living big.
If you see a non-native invasive, point your finger in that direction.
Oh my God.
But between 0 and 4,
What do you think? 4 or 5?
as a scientist, the way you find out is you conduct an experiment.
I wanted to learn more about plants, especially from this side of the world. In a classroom, we don't get the hands-on experience versus here, we actually get to see the things. We actually get to identify.
She said it, Taylor.
But the volume of water is going to be very high. Like anywhere that you see compost, like on top of this hill here, down in this little valley.
A lot of that pollution that's coming in is coming from all throughout the watershed.
So to start off, it's important to recognize where MWEEs come from, as they certainly didn't pop out of thin air. In 2014, the most recent Chesapeake Watershed Agreement was signed, and it included a new and important goal that addresses environmental literacy. The goal asks for students in the region to graduate with the knowledge and skills to act responsibly to protect and restore their local watershed. Essentially, this is acknowledging that young people are our future decision makers, and it highlights the importance of both formal and non-formal education in molding students to become stewards of the environment. To address this environmental literacy goal, the MWEE was developed. MWEEs are built on best practices. They're learner-centered experiences that focus on investigations into local environmental issues that lead to informed action and civic engagement while connecting to standards-based classroom learning. MWEEs support science standards and social studies standards. They align with STEM education, Virginia SOLs, NGSS, C3, and other frameworks. It's really important to note that MWEEs aren't meant to be something extra. They're a tool for meeting multiple objectives. As I mentioned, MWEEs are based on the best practices of environmental education, and they really are a kind of project-based learning. MWEEs do a number of things to support students, but the most relevant are outlined here on the screen. MWEEs increase student engagement and enthusiasm for learning by making authentic connections in the lives of students. They support student achievement by providing opportunities for students to engage in problem-solving situations, ones that they can recognize in their own communities and school grounds. They advance 21st century learning skills, things like critical thinking, communication, collaboration, among many others. And MWEEs, of course, promote environmental stewardship and civic responsibility. As we involve students in these in-depth and meaningful processes of identifying issues and developing solutions, they can recognize their ability and really their responsibility in the protection of the environment. So now you're probably wondering, what does a MWEE really look like? what makes something a MWEE? How is it different than a simple field trip, or how is it different than what you're already doing in your programs or your classes? There are 4 essential elements and 4 supporting practices that build on each other to create this kind of comprehensive learning experience for our students. If you look below, you'll see 4 of our essential elements. They aren't in any particular order because these can really happen at different times. There isn't a prescribed, rhyme or reason or exact way to do this. It's really what fits best into your classroom or program. So the first one that we'll touch on here is issue definition, which tends to come at the beginning. It tends to be one of the first essential elements that are addressed. So during issue investigation, students focus on an environmental issue, a problem, or a phenomenon that requires some sort of background research and investigation. There's a driving question that focuses the inquiry, and that really helps to connect things back to standards so that teachers are able to ensure that this MWEE is addressing exactly what they need to address in their classroom. And from that driving question, students develop supporting questions around the topic in order to better understand the issue at hand. Ideally, those are student developed questions. However, at different grade levels, perhaps elementary school, there might be more assistance where teachers are co-creating questions with students. The investigations address the driving questions and the supporting questions, and they're answered through a variety of different methods. So through classroom instruction, the collection of data, conducting experiments, talking to experts, and of course, reviewing credible publications. This process, as I mentioned, should be age appropriate with practices growing in complexity and sophistication across the grades. So starting with educator-guided investigation and, as you get into higher grade levels, it should really be student-led inquiry. Another of the essential elements is outdoor field experiences. Of course, these are core to the MWEE, where students participate in at least one, but ideally more outdoor field experiences sufficient to investigate the problem, issue, or phenomenon. Again, these are directly connected back to that driving question, and investigations could include a variety of things from making observations, collecting data, or other activities that are directly relevant to the question. Students are ideally actively involved in planning the investigation, so designing tools for taking measurements, constructing the project, and other things, within the appropriate safety guidelines, with teachers providing instruction on methods and procedures and data collection protocols, and of course the proper use of equipment. Outdoor field experiences can take place on-site or off-site, so that could be on your school grounds, perhaps doing a schoolyard inventory of biodiversity or an energy audit. It could be off-site, such as going to a local park and looking at water quality on a stream. Outdoor field experiences look like many different things, and this is oftentimes where partner organizations come into play. Partner organizations can range very significantly. Think local park staff, nature center educators, museum interpreters, or other local experts. However, there's always a direct tie to what this outdoor field experience is and what's going on in the classroom. So it's not a singular field trip that doesn't really connect back to the lessons. It's directly essential for connecting and making sense of the issue at hand. Another of our essential elements is synthesis and conclusions, and this one really happens throughout the entire process. So after each investigation, after each outdoor field experience or classroom-led activity, students are identifying, synthesizing, and applying their evidence to draw conclusions and make claims. Synthesizing data looks like a variety of different things. Think creating graphs, tables, charts, maps. And then students communicate either internally and or externally the results of their inquiry. So they might be communicating among their class in order to kind of develop a claim, or they might be communicating with an external expert that they had been working on to confirm the results of their investigation. At the end of the series of investigations, so after all of the investigations, after they've kind of gone through and answered all of their supporting questions and compiled all of their information, then they're developing a claim which will directly address that driving question. So this claim is really essential because it helps us take the next step, which tends to be this fourth essential element, stewardship and civic action. So after students have their claim, they take that and they identify and explore different age-appropriate solutions for taking action. So these solutions can be drawn through the investigations. They should be drawn through the investigations, and the action projects can range in size and scope and scale depending on a variety of factors. This is another place where we see partners really coming into play and playing an essential role in assisting teachers and providing that kind of outside expertise. And there are kind of 4 bins of action projects that we see commonly, and they are listed right up here. Watershed restoration and protection. So these are things like creating schoolyard habitat or removing invasive species, doing a community cleanup, or maybe doing some sort of project around stormwater management. Another example are everyday choices. So doing some sort of campaign that encourages composting or energy conservation or reduce, reuse, recycle, upcycle. Community engagement. So these are other sorts of campaigns that might be based on social media, doing a presentation at a PTA event, or going to your county board of supervisors and trying to, communicate some sort of change that you'd like to see in your community and getting people to buy into that. So this is a persuasive kind of action. And then finally, another bin that we often see is civic engagement. So this is kind of more on the politics side of things, or making change from a legislative perspective. So writing your elected officials and decision makers, meeting with important elected officials to learn about different policy aspects and see where there's an opportunity to make change, attending town meetings, or simply voting. So those are kind of the 4 bins that we oftentimes see addressed during the action step of the MWEE. However, it's really important to recognize that the action step is sometimes the most exciting and invigorating for students, and this is really their time to shine. It's a place where they can think creatively and innovatively about actions that directly address the problem that they've been working on. So these aren't the only answers, if you will, to some of the issues that we see. And again, this is a place where student voice really comes in, and we like to see, students taking creative and innovative action. So just to recap, we've gone over the 4 essential elements of the MWEE. These are the things that students do. Our 4 essential elements are issue definition, outdoor field experiences, synthesis and conclusions, and action projects. All the while these essential elements are going on, teachers are doing the 4 supporting practices. Our first supporting practice is active teacher support. So this is where teachers are facilitating student learning and ensuring that the essential elements support academic goals. Teachers are in the best position to help students make connections and draw on past lessons. They serve as environmental role models and enhance students' overall outdoor education experience, and they should really be involved in all elements of the MWEE. To support them in this role, to support our students, teachers should have appropriate knowledge of environmental issues, watershed concepts, skills in connecting these issues to their curriculum, competency in environmental education pedagogy, including the ability and confidence to teach outdoor lessons and to teach students in critical thinking about environmental issues. We realize that this isn't something that every single teacher has training in before they start teaching. So this is really where partners can come in and be especially helpful to provide professional development, and other opportunities for teachers to get them up to speed on some of these important elements. Another of our supporting practices is classroom integration. MWEs are anchored in curriculum standards. These experiences should be integrated into what's occurring in the classroom, and they can provide authentic, age-appropriate, engaging, multidisciplinary content to address these academic standards. Specifically, elements of science and social studies standards related to questioning and investigation, evidence-based analysis interpretation, model and theory building, knowledge of environmental processes and systems, skills for understanding and addressing environmental issues, and personal and civic responsibility align really well with MWEs. While there are some portions of the MWE that might occur off campus, such as outdoor field experiences, these are always integrated into the scope and sequence of the academic program. The third supporting practice is local context. So this provides life-relevant learning, and the local community and environment should be viewed as a primary resource for students as they're doing MWEs. Place-based education promotes learning that is rooted in the unique history, environment, culture, economy, literature, art, etc. of a student's schoolyard, neighborhood, town, or community. And this offers students and teachers the opportunity to explore how individual and collective decisions impact their immediate surroundings. So once a firm connection to their local environment is made with students, they're better positioned to expand their thinking to recognize far-reaching implications of the decisions that they make to the larger national and global environment. Our fourth supporting practice is sustained activity. So these are experiences that are set over time, and they're part of typically a unit of study. So this is more than just a field trip. The MWE includes a full duration leading up to and following the outdoor field experiences. Sometimes it feels like the outdoor field experience or maybe the action project are like the most exciting parts of the MWE, and perhaps they are, but there's sufficient content and learning around those experiences to make them relevant and to make them really important to the students' learning. Each component should involve significant investment of instructional time, incorporate time for reflection, and include all students. MWEs are for all students. Experiences like tours, simulations, demonstrations, or nature walks can be instructionally useful, but on their own, they do not constitute an entire meaningful watershed educational experience as defined in this guide. So just to recap on our four supporting practices, our four supporting practices are what teachers do to ensure the success of MWEs. They are active teacher support, classroom integration, local context, and sustained activity. Our essential elements and supporting practices work together to create this thing called the MWE. This video follows the trajectory of a MWE at James Wood Middle School in Winchester, Virginia. As you watch the case study, try to identify the four essential elements and the four supporting practices throughout.
I'm Dale Byard. I teach science at James Wood Middle School here in Frederick County, Virginia. We are at a unique location here at James Wood Middle School. Our school is part of the original settlement for the city of Winchester. Glen Burnie, next door to us, which is part of the Museum of the Shenandoah Valley. Glen Burnie means a land with many springs. It's why James Wood, who was the surveyor in this area, chose it. People settle where water is because water is everything and you can't live without it.
And we know water likes to travel as a group, so if one starts carving a path, the rest of the water molecules behind it are going to do the choo-choo train and pull each other down. Does anyone remember what that property of water was called where they like to stick together? My name is Megan Riley. I'm a 6th grade science teacher at James Wood Middle School. Say it louder, Michaela! Cohesion! We have a very diverse spectrum here at James Wood Middle School. It's just a big melting pot, and yet somehow we kind of bring them in together and have just a lot of fun learning science. Evaporation, condensation, precipitation.
Megan Riley and I partnered this year and decided that we shouldn't do the MWEE project in isolation. that it really lent itself to many of the SOLs we had to cover this year.
Our wells. What do you notice about the color?
We taught about how the water molecule is unique and why it is essential for life, and we could link that in with our MWEE project.
That indicate on a contour.
Topography, erosion, and weathering. There were so many things that we teach in science this year that we could roll into our MWEE project and make it really rich and have the kids firsthand understand.
Water is the only substance on Earth that does what?
Oh yes, please. Solid, liquid, and gas.
Ever since I started working here at James Wood Middle School, I felt that the museum next door to us was a wonderful resource. They were so enthusiastic. We did a field trip where we went over the history of our town. We did water testing over at the museum to see how pure the water was that was coming out of the springs.
It's the largest one, and it's the beginning of the town run.
We needed to come up with something the kids could own. We wanted something that was local, and we needed something that was going to be a culminating project.
When we get a lot of rain, where does all the runoff from?
We surveyed the area, and there was a drainage area to the side of the property of our school. There was farmland where we have cows grazing, so we had phosphate and nitrate pollution coming from that area. We also had chemicals coming off the parking lot. We also knew that the museum was going to start a new entrance right next to the school, and so we had the possibility of having sediment runoff. And I thought it was marvelous that we had all of the major pollution sources that are affecting the Chesapeake Bay right here in a little microcosm of our school watershed, and that water, if untreated, was going to go down the sewer.
Is the parking lot perfectly flat, or does it go down towards our ditch? So the water all collects there.
The children did a hydrogeology lab where they tested how water reacts on different surfaces. They tested concrete, they tested bare soil, they tested grass, and they tested native Virginia plants to see which surface had the best recharge and not a lot of runoff, which could cause flooding and make more pollutants go into our watershed. And they discovered that Virginia native plants did the best job at recharge and stopping runoff.
We have 6th graders at James Wood Middle School planting a wildlife erosion control garden. Right now they're spreading the soil that was brought in by a company. We'll be planting some shrubs and wildflowers. They're all natives. Students selected the plants because they know that they'll grow in this environment, and they're also plants that are helpful for our native pollinators and will also provide food for birds. What's happening here at this school is exceeding my expectations. The teachers are thoroughly invested in this. They came up with a new partner, not just Blandy, but the Museum of the Shenandoah Valley. That's fabulous because they realize that the museum and the school share the same watershed.
Teamwork is dreamwork, guys.
Okay, so let's break up the roof.
Very good. Look at how much you guys accomplished right now.
These are the awards for Best Environmental Impact Study of the James Wood Middle School Watershed.
You had the artistic people who were able to show their artistic side in the drawing of their diagrams. You had the kids who are extremely well written and well spoken, who were able to write their presentations and talk about what they learned effectively. And then you have the kids who just like to get down and dirty, and they wanted to help plant those plants or move the soil where it needed to be. Every kid wanted to jump on board with this project in some way or another. They took it very seriously because they realized it was a real-world problem that they had an opportunity to do something about and make a change to their environment for the better.
For making it a project that was happening right at their school that affected the water they drink every day.
Jacob's ladder is one of the ones you guys planted.
They came up with the idea for it. They were able to implement it and plant it, actually proving that as young as they are, they could have a really meaningful impact on their local watershed.
So in this video, we saw two fantastic teachers who teamed up to make this really strong MWEE for their students. We see that the students engage in a number of investigations, including outdoor field experiences, that help them to better understand the issues right in their own community. Megan and Dale provide ample time for synthesis of data and reflection on the investigations. They also provide time and space for students to brainstorm ideas for an action that addresses their driving question. And their driving question was, how do our local land use management practices and choices affect our local watershed? They also do a great job of making this truly interdisciplinary. Throughout this MWEE, students address standards in science, history, social sciences, math, and English. The entire issue is situated in this very hyperlocal context, which makes it directly relevant for students. One thing that this video doesn't show, but is really important to point out, is the critical role that partner organizations can play in the MWEE. We saw Candace from Blandy Experimental Farm featured briefly towards the end as her and her staff supported the James Wood Middle School students in the procurement of Virginia native plants, and also with the planting itself. We oftentimes see partners play this kind of role, supporting the outdoor field experience or the action project, but Blandy Farm actually provided significant support throughout this entire MWEE, especially by running a series of teacher professional development workshops right at the beginning that helped teachers like Megan and Dale deepen their understanding of the MWEE and to think about how things like outdoor field experiences and action projects really connect back to the content that they're already teaching in their classroom. In 2017, the Bay Program Education Workgroup developed an easy-to-use manual for constructing high-quality MWEEs. This is known as the Educator's Guide to the Meaningful Watershed Educational Experience. The guide provides some basic tools to help think, plan, and evaluate a MWEE. Perhaps you've seen it before. One of these tools is the Environmental Literacy Model, or ELM. It's designed to help situate the MWEE within the scope and sequence of the curriculum and to assist in communicating how each of the essential elements is really embedded into the entirety of the program. The ELM features 3 primary components: curriculum anchor, issue investigation, and stewardship and civic action. There are other tools in the MWEE toolbox, including a few like the driving questions tool, the field study sites, and action projects that are designed to help you think through some of those essential elements and to think about how they can be incorporated into your classroom or program. In the back of the guide, there's also something called the MWEE Audit Tool, which helps you to evaluate your MWEE, which ensures the fidelity to the model. I wanted to touch on a couple of resources for continuing your MWEE education. This webinar is a great start, but putting things to practice is really where the rubber meets the road. So there are a number of resources that can be really helpful in the development of your MWEE. But the hub for all of this is really on Bay Backpack. This is an online resource that supports hands-on environmental learning, and it provides educators with information about funding, field studies, curriculum guides, and lesson plans all related to the Chesapeake Bay. Bay Backpack helps educators find the tools that they need to give their students meaningful watershed educational experiences. And there's actually an entire tab dedicated to the MWEE on Bay Backpack, which includes the videos that you saw during this webinar, plus many more. There's actually a video for each of the essential elements, as well as a video for partnerships and a few others. Bay Backpack is really your one-stop shop for MWEE, so be sure to check it out. In the spring of 2019, we're really excited the Chesapeake Bay program will be launching a brand new online MWEE course on NOAA's learning platform known as Chesapeake Exploration. The online course is going to use the MWEE guide as a textbook and dive even deeper into MWEEs. So we'll be following case studies, providing examples of some of the completed tools like the ELMS and the audit tool, and more. So you can keep an eye out for this. It will be coming soon this spring. And when the course is live, you'll be able to access it via Bay Backpack. So thanks everybody for hanging with us throughout this webinar on the Meaningful Watershed Educational Experience. I hope you learned a little bit about MWEEs, and we wish you the success in implementing or supporting MWEEs through your programs and your classes. If you have questions about MWEEs or about BWET or anything like that, feel free to contact me at elise.trelligan@noaa.gov. Thanks very much.